Hey, what's up? I'm Brian Fennell, also known as Bry Guy, and I have a show called Wine Unknown. So if you have any questions that you would like to get answered about wine, just click the link. It's going to send you to my inbox, and you just leave your message there.
That looks good. What's that?
It's Wine Unknown. Welcome to Wine Unknown. I'm your host. My name is Brian Fennell, also known as Bry Guy, and I'm a wine specialist. What does that even mean? Well, it means that I know a lot of information about wine, and I want to share that along with my passion with you guys. So no matter where you're at in your journey, no matter if it's the beginning, the middle, well, let's face it, there's no such thing as the end. This is the show for you. All right, so last episode, we've learned that viticulture is all about the vineyard and what's happening with the grapes during the 4-season growth cycle. I kind of glanced over the viniculture side because the winery side begins something new. But let's jump into it right now. All right, after the grapes have been cut from their vines and delivered to the winery, what happens next? Well, there's this thing called a sorting table. Now, if there's a big budget operation, then there's a conveyor belt where the grapes are being dumped onto, and then the conveyor belt just keeps the grapes moving along, where there's a team of people that's looking through all of the grapes to make sure that they're healthy, or if they're unhealthy, they're discarding them. If it's not a big operation or a big business operation, then it's literally a table, like one of those folding tables that you're playing cards on or something like that. You know, it's a small table, but there still is a team in place to go through all of the grapes to make sure they're of quality for production. And that's just the beginning, to make sure that, all right, this one isn't rotted or anything like that. Like, this is good enough to use to put in the wine where it won't affect the quality. And that's the first step in the winery after harvest, would be the sorting table. Now, it makes it easier if you do have a conveyor belt because it's already moving the grape bunches along. But for the operations that don't have a conveyor belt, they do have someone responsible for transporting the sorted grapes from the sorting table to the destemmer/crusher, which would be the next phase of this whole operation. So imagine this horizontal cylinder-like machine that has a smaller cylinder in it with holes, okay? So the grapes are getting dumped into this machine and the smaller cylinder is rotating. Now, it's perfect because the smaller cylinder has holes that's the perfect size for grapes to drop down only. It's cutting it off from the stems. Now, this isn't the most precise device to use, but it's far better on time efficiency than having someone manually pluck the grapes away from the stems and discarding them. So with this device called the destemmer, that's exactly what it's doing. It's destemming. Just imagine like a cheese grater. It's like that smaller cylinder. It's like that. So when you're sliding the block of cheese down the grater, the cheese on the inside of the grater is now shredded. It's getting cut away from the block. And that's kind of the same thing that's happening with this destemmer. As it's rotating, it's chopping the grapes away from the stems. But there still may be some stem attached to the grape. Not much, but that may end up in the bunch still. But the fascinating thing about this is when it's discarding the stem still looks like after you've had grapes, right? That you bought from the grocery store, and you eat all of those grapes, and how the stem is still looking like a tree. It still looks, it's fully intact. It's just, you can just see that it's just been cut. The grapes have been cut off of it. It's fantastic. It's beautiful. It's amazing, you know? So that's exactly what's happening with the first feature or function of this destemmer's crusher. Also, the crushing side comes in when the grapes are getting cut, it's a good chance that they're getting split open as well. They're not fully intact all the time. And now the grapes are starting to bleed the juice. But that's all right, because now all of this is falling into something called a press, which would be the next step in this whole process of viniculture, where the press is exactly what it sounds like. It's when you press or squeeze the grapes until juice flows out of them. You all might have seen the famous photos of groups of people smashing grapes with their feet or stomping on grapes with their feet. Well, this is that stage, except we have technology now that doesn't cause for people to do that anymore. Like, I don't want your crusty toes touching something I'm about to drink. Ew. I mean, if I had to do it, then I'm not above it. I'm sorry, I digress. All right, but so what's happening is the first and the second pressings are the better quality juice. Anything after that starts to get really bitter because of the stems, the seeds, the grape skins are all more present than the juice. So you can press these things as many times as you would like until no more juice is coming out of it. But every time the quality is just getting worse and worse and worse. So that's just to get you a little idea of pressing. So just imagine you have a cloth that you're trying to squeeze or wring the liquid out of. In the beginning, it's going to be a lot of liquid coming out, but the more you do it, the less and less comes out, and the more effort you put into it. It's still the same concept. It's just like that with these pressings of the grapes. They can continue on doing it however many times they like to, but it's just the quality is just going to diminish, and it's going to become more bitter and bitter because there's not any more liquid left in it. So what's the purpose in doing multiple pressings if only the first 2 to 3 are good quality? Well, usually wineries sell the later pressings off or to get shipped to make brandies or some of your favorite cosmetic products. But the first 3 pressings, that juice, that liquid, those are all in stainless steel tanks or being stored in some kind of container off to the side somewhere. The reasoning for this is there are active smaller particles still in that juice that we can't see. But once you let that juice settle, then all of those smaller particles start to combine, and then they'll fall to the bottom of the container. And you want to remove that juice from those smaller particles. And that's a process called racking, but we'll get into that later. I just want you to know right now, all of that liquid looks like white wine. There's no pink color to it yet, or there's no red color to it yet. So the flesh or the inside of a grape, that color is the yellowish kind of color that you would see from white wine. There's no other color within that. So once you squeeze it, that's the color that's coming out. But how do we get it pink or how do we get it red? The only way to do that is outside of food coloring. The dye, you can just throw that in there. But outside of that is the actual grape skins itself. So once that juice is all settling, you want to throw the grape skins in there. Now this varies on how long you want the grape skins to have contact with the juice to determine the rosé or pinkish kind of color. Cause some people could do it for like 2 hours, or longer. The longer you have the grape skins in contact, the darker the color is going to become of the wine. Now that we have the desired color that we want the potential wine to be, the only thing that's left to do is to start the fermentation process. Now, we've covered fermentation in the very first episode of the show. That episode is called What is Wine? So if you haven't listened to it already, I suggest you check it out. Now that the juice have settled and the winery has done everything it needs to do in order for this wine to be the best representation of it, let's add the yeast and let's turn this juice into wine. Now, mind you, this process can take up to a few weeks, so this is the moment where you can relax a little bit. The only thing that you're trying to worry about is to make sure that it does not stop fermenting before you want it to. After the fermentation process is over, the only thing to focus on now is trying to get the wine clear. I know, because then we already get it clear with the juice. That was the juice. After the fermentation process, now we have more small particles in the now wine that we have to separate from, because we don't want any off flavors or off aromas coming from the wine. So we have to separate those, and that's when we have to get crafty and use techniques such as racking, fining, and filtering. How they do that in a winery is up to the winemaker, but racking for sure is just moving the wine from the container it's in now to a brand new container. And you can do that several times because there are always small particles that we just can't see that need to rest and show themselves. But racking isn't enough. We have to make sure that this wine is going to stay clear. And the only way to do that is to introduce fining agents. Now, what these things do are they attract the microscopic particles to themselves. So therefore, they become small particles that we can eventually see, and then we remove from the wine. I know, we have such an obsession with it being clear. Now, after you do the fining stage, we have one more thing. This is kind of like the nail in the coffin, just to make sure, but like, I know that this is going to be clear. It's no way. There's a filtering process. So just in case we missed out on something, we're going to triple check it by sending the wine through a filter as it's hitting the bottle. And then that's it for trying to get the wine clear. I mean, there are other things, other steps that's in between depending on the style of wine, but for the most part, we're done. We just have to put the wine in a bottle and store it until it's ready for market. So there you have it, folks. That's an overview of viniculture and how wine is made. Sure, there are way more techniques and processes within viniculture, but we'll go into those further down the line in our wine journey. But for now, let's rejoice in the fact that we have a good understanding of viniculture, the science of how wine is made. Cheers! If you like this episode, please share, subscribe, comment, tell your friends. This is awesome. If you have any questions about wine, just click the link. It's going to take you to Ask Bright Guy. Ask me anything you want to ask about wine, and I'm going to answer it. All right. Don't forget to check out the Facebook group, Wine Unknown Community. That's new. Hope to see you there. Cheers.